Hi, and I'm John Durrant from My Spiritual Link, and this is the Train from Condor Online, and my guest today is M.A.Cope.
Yay!
The author M.A.Cope, who writes horror stories,
I do.
amongst other things.
Yes.
Tell me why everybody's saying, why have you got an author on the train? Because we deal mainly with things mystical, things spiritual and things scientific, so why an author? But your books are special. Tell me about your books.
Well, there's 3 series of books. So the first series is the Bond series. There's going to be 4 in the actual full series. So I've got the 3 out, which you can see out on the table at the minute, and they tell they're dark fantasy horror. They tell the story of the unusual relationship between Becca Martin, who is a witch in denial, and Anthony Cardova, who is a vampire under a curse. And they're interlinked.
Excuse me a second, can I just stop you for a minute?
Go on.
A witch in denial
Yes.
and a vampire under a curse.
Yes, so his curse is to make him a vampire, but he's not the sort of vampire you can stake. You have to break the curse.
Okay.
Okay, and they're linked together because of Anthony's wife, who happens to be Becca's ancestor. So he comes back from the past, and it all gets. So to free himself, he has to kill all of his wife's descendants, of which Becca is one of them. So this is why it comes into the present, and he's hell bent on trying to kill her. But she needs to stop him, and the only way she can stop him, because she doesn't know how to break the curse, is put him back into the sarcophagus where he was found.
So when Netflix going to take this up?
Soon, I hope.
Because
I'm working on it, but
that sounds awesome and very complicated.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, well, people have
love
loved it. People do love the story, and I've had fantastic reviews on it. And it's progressing.
Surprised.
I've created this world now. I call it the world of Anthony and Becca, and I've even written a prequel, which is as a reader magnet to get people on my mailing list, and that goes back before Anthony, so it goes all the way back. And I love writing about stuff like that.
Why choose horror? Why things like that? Why vampires and?
Well, vampires is easy. I watched.
Don't tell me you are one.
Well, you never know. Daywalker, I do have the rings.
Oh, right,
If
fair
you watch
enough.
Vampire Diaries. The rules, there's different rules for everything. No, I used to watch horror films with my dad when I was younger, so I grew up with Dr.'Phibes, and I love
Dr.
Surprise.
Phibes.
I haven't seen many Hammer horror ones, but Dr.'Phibes I loved, and we used to watch that. But we also watched Frank Langella play Dracula in the 70s. And that's when I fell in love.
Oh.
Completely hook, line and sinker with Dracula as a character, with vampires, and that whole, because I've read Bram Stoker's novel. It's one of my favourite novels. It's the best love story ever told.
Yes.
And people disagree with me. They go, it's not a love story. I said, if you read it, it is a love story. And that, because I'm not a soppy romantic, but that kind of epic tale of somebody willing to sacrifice their life and all that sort of stuff, that really gets me. And there's something about vampires, because they were human. This has happened to them. It's been inflicted on them in a way. But so they've had a past. They're not monsters, I don't think. To me, they're more erotic and sensual creatures.
Okay, so how do you feel about things like Resident Evil and stuff like that?
I haven't seen Resident Evil. I've never watched it.
So things that are born
Yeah.
rather than created, because I get the impression that vampires are created.
Yeah, it depends. In theory, they're created, but if you watch enough films and stuff, you get the ones that are born. Because I think in the Underworld series, the films, they were because that was the vampire werewolves. They were actually born.
Yeah.
So if you're a pure blood, and they do it a lot with werewolves, because in theory, werewolves are created. You get scratched or bitten and survive, you become a werewolf. It's only if you kill that you're saved from it. If you know
So what we're actually saying here is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you're saying that there is no real information, in fact, about these supernatural beings. So if there are vampires, we don't know if they're born, or we don't know if they're created by bites, or they are mythical creatures.
Well, there's 2 camps in this, because the folklore, the myth and folklore. Now, I'm of the belief that all folklore starts in reality. So these stories that were told way back when have started with something much smaller. So it's like Chinese whispers, and it's suddenly, as people have retold the story, it's got bigger. So it's the whole fishing incident. You catch a minnow, and all of a sudden, by the time you've got home, you've caught this huge fish that's about this big.
Of course.
So it's that sort of thing. However, there are diseases or illnesses. I think it's porphyria, I think it's called, which is a disease which makes you crave blood.
Now, everybody is going to be looking that up now. Porphyria?
I think it's called. Don't ask me how to spell it. I can't remember.
Okay, well, somebody's going to look that up, and somebody's going to come back and tell us what it is.
I think it's
Comments
that.
below,
and it's
please.
something to do with craving blood, and a lot of people have said, "Oh, that's because in the old days, this is how science has proved that vampires don't exist. Oh, it's porphyria. It's a disease. That's why they crave blood."
So in actual fact, they're proving that it doesn't exist, but it does exist because of the fact that it's proved that it doesn't exist.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So lycanthropy, which is your werewolf stuff, you've got the hypertrichosis, which is a genetic disease. I think it's genetic. It means your body's born with excess hair.
Yep.
So you were called Wolf Boy. So if you think back to Barnum and his circus with
the
the Wolf
bearded
Boy,
lady, the
this
Wolf
is
Boy,
all linked to. So all these things, because the Victorians were prolific in the fact they believed all this stuff.
And they made stuff
they
up
used
that they
to
couldn't.
dig people up. They would chop heads off of people they were convinced were vampires. They would do so much stuff. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
You look up all this stuff. You know, the internet is a fantastic resource just for looking at all, because I've done loads and loads of blogs.
You told me you lied to me and said you'd done no research.
Well, I don't specifically
do
research.
such a lot about it.
I don't specifically do research for the books, but as because I'm interested in the area and I've written blogs and I write blogs, I will research what I write.
So we started off talking about the books, and you were talking about how romantic it was, in essence, that you've got a love story with Bram Stoker, and now your books where you're talking about Anthony, who has got all sorts of things going on with him and his curse, and then you've got this person, I've forgotten her name, Becca, who doesn't know that she's a witch.
Well, she knows, but she doesn't want to be one.
She doesn't recognise the fact that she's a witch.
No.
And so this is...
Because she was bullied for it as a child.
So what you're actually making here is something which is quite romantic.
It is, and everybody says, "Oh, are they going to get together?" I'm going, no, I don't write romance. So there is that underlying, there is that will they, won't they? And I'm not going to say the end to book 4, because obviously that's the conclusion to the series, but there is there is a connection, hence the name of the series, the main name of the series is Bonds, because you have the blood bonds. And as well as other bonds that keep us together.
So J.K. Rowling didn't say there were only going to be 7 books or whatever it was. Yeah, okay.
No.
I must say I'm a bit taken aback with this, because initially you're saying you don't know anything about it, and yet here you are telling me exactly why.
I know lots and lots about
it. Obviously you do.
But what I mean is I don't spend days in libraries going through stuff.
No.
I think I've absorbed it.
But tell me then, if you are looking at these horror people and these beings that are there, where does this come in the supernatural? Where does this come in the supernatural? Or the paranormal?
Yeah.
Or...
Well, I think that, because it's one of those, because until we started talking, I use them quite interchangeably, because paranormal, most people associate with ghosts. They think, paranormal's ghosts, that's it. Supernatural is everything else. Well, it's technically not correct. If you look it up, not that I've kind of wrapped my head around the dictionary definition.
However, you just happen to have a Wikipedia.
Just like that, as if by magic. No.
Well, we did talk about this earlier.
Supernatural is what they mean is something that goes against nature. So lightning used to be classed.
Natural.
Yeah. So lightning used to be classed as supernatural hundreds of years ago, because nobody knew what it was, and it was coming down from the heavens. So it was. All stories would have been made up. Maybe you've got the Greek god Thor, isn't it? He was either the lightning guy? Was it Zeus that was
Zeus
lightning god?
this.
I can't remember which one. Yeah. So that was classed as supernatural. And I suppose if you have I mean, science has proved it's not supernatural because it is a natural phenomenon. And I suppose, sometimes you can get in the ocean these huge whirlpool style things that create a hole, which, if you don't know what it is, it's almost like, where's that going to go? Does that go to another realm? Does it this? So that's supernatural, because in theory it's going against an ocean. So I'm thinking this is the way my brain's trying to interpret what Wiki Dictionary, whatever it's called, has said. Whereas paranormal, they're saying they're things that can't be explained by science. But it does say supernatural.
But the thing is that paranormal things are being explained more and more by science every day.
Well, science has to ruin everything, though, doesn't it, really?
One of the things...
That's a whole different conversation.
One of the things that came up on the last train with Chris Burgess was he was talking about black holes and dark matter. So you're talking about whirlpools in the ocean, and where does that lead to? Where's that going? Well, perhaps we've got black holes in the universe. And where do they lead to? Where are they going? Or are they just going to be, there's just going to be a bottom to them and that's it? That's the end. Let's start again on something else.
I think it depends what you believe, isn't it? I think it's very naive to think we are the only living things in this huge cosmos, or whatever we want to call it. Where other life is, I have no idea, but it just seems a bit strange that we would be the only ones.
Okay.
I don't know.
So where do you put... I want to come back to that in a minute, actually. I'm going to bring you back to that. But where do you put your supernatural and your paranormal in your books? Where do you place them?
As in what I would class them as?
Yeah.
Well, in theory, technically they're paranormal, aren't they?
Are they?
Well, yeah, because
I don't know.
They're not. In theory, not scientifically proven per se, but they're fantasy.
But hang on a minute, you're saying they're not scientifically proven per se, and then on the other hand, you've just explained to me what a vampire is, and you've also explained to me what a werewolf
and
is.
I've said there's diseases that could be linked to it. I've not said nobody's disproved that. Nobody said vampires don't exist. Nobody's proved they do. Nobody's proved they don't. It's
have you got the garlic?
It's folklore, though, isn't it?
It is folklore.
It's
yes,
stories
you are right.
and it's tales like that. I say supernatural, but in theory, that's now I've googled what it means. You're probably thinking more paranormal. It's only because it's the way I think the media and film and TV brand things. You've always think paranormal is ghosts and everything else is supernatural.
I haven't yet managed to get a witch on the show. But I'm putting a little request out there, actually. If there are any witches who would like to get in touch and come and see us, we would love to have a witch on the show. But my understanding is my daughter's been looking into this quite a lot. And in actual fact, witches, if you go back, they're naturopaths.
Yeah,
they're actually people who just manage to go along hedgerows and get out a whole set of bits and bobs that they can use for healing people. And also some very special mushrooms that they can use for mind expansion and doing other things, which is possibly where the witches thing came from, and the broomsticks. Because if you are on magic mushrooms, not that I've ever done it, of course, you could be flying off on a broomstick somewhere. There is another story there.
There is that. I mean, people used to be accused of witches for all sorts of stuff. It's because they did things that wasn't normal, so they're using plants to heal people, they're making potions and poultices and all this, and it's like, well, why is that fixing you? Nobody understood how it could possibly work.
How it worked.
They were single women, they were middle-aged, they had no children, they used any excuse in the world.
Yes.
They were different, and that's half the trouble. And even now people are bullied for being different, and that's a theme that comes through the Bond series and the children's book The Misfits. It's okay for you to be different, just accept who you are. And the world, although we like to think we're a lot more accommodating,
we're not.
I don't think we are.
No. Well, tell me a bit more about your witch. I've gone off that little topic quite quickly because I want to talk about your little witch. I don't want to get, otherwise we're going to get quite involved in the rest of the world. I don't want to get in. Yeah. So
well, Becca, her the witchcraft element within this is something I've met, is fiction. It passes down from grandmother to granddaughter, so it always misses a generation. And it happens, Becca, That's in my world.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, in my world.
Okay.
So it misses a generation. So Becca's a witch, her grandmother's a witch, but her mother isn't. However, her mother still has psychic abilities, so she's a medium. She can still tune into that sort of stuff. She's just not
Okay.
a full-on witch. Now, Becca was, like I said, her grandmother was a witch, and the kids at school used to, on Halloween especially, do pranks on her, but her grandmother would just get her own back, and because she just
Prank them
care.
back again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just prank them back. Well, Becca, because she was ostracised at school,
Yep.
nobody wanted to be her friend because they weren't quite sure what she might do to them. They were all this sort of stuff. So she didn't really want to be a witch, and on her 16th birthday she was given the grimoire, she was given the whole cape, she was inducted into the coven, which she didn't want. She says, I don't want to be any more different than I already am. But gradually her grandmother drew it out of her and got her interested in magic by doing so the simple levitation of the pencil, that kind of thing, and it sparked her interest. But then her grandmother passed away, and that was it. She didn't want any more to do with it. And it turns out, to help herself survive Anthony, she has to accept who she is and use her gift.
I am becoming
to help him.
more and more interested here. I want to get involved in this.
It's fascinating. I mean, I dabble. I'm not a witch, but I do the
Do you indeed?
yeah, and I'm getting more in tune with the moon now. I'm starting to look at the moon energy and just observing my own, how I feel at different phases of the moon. It's all very new, but it's fascinating. I love it. It fascinates me.
Now, your reverse namesake, Anne-Marie, is also very interested in all that.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie Myers, she's been here. She's very interested in the moon and its phases, and we have discussed the strength of the moon, the energy of the moon, because it does have its own magnetic pull,
Yeah.
and it does have its own gravitational pull. And let's face it, it affects the seas on the Earth. Is it 70-something% of the Earth's surface is covered by water?
Yeah.
And the moon affects it all.
Of course it does.
And it also will affect, because we are 80% water, surely it affects us in some way or other.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, read more and more about it, and it affects women more than men in a number of different ways, which I'm not going to go into.
No, but in the
now.
old days,
But
all women would get together
absolutely.
and everybody would be in tune.
Every-
Just put it that way.
let's
They'd
just
all
put
be
it-
in sync.
Yeah, that's right. I've had that in my house. They've got 3. Yeah, okay. never
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, it does work. It does still
It
work.
does work.
apparently, Yeah.
It does work.
Yeah.
And that is all down to the moon.
Yeah, well,
And
look
what
at
it
the
does, how
full
it does it.
moon and the link to werewolves. Now, the full moon, if you observe how you feel around a full moon,
Yeah.
you quite often, I know I get all sort of agitated and antsy and all this sort of stuff. And I think, well, I have a look, what's the moon doing? And it's usually because it's a full moon, and and they're linking into that, this madness. There's a lot of people, they staff up hospitals, don't they, around the full moon,
Yep.
and police, because they know the blooming idiots are going to
Okay.
come out for whatever reason. But that is linked into the whole werewolf thing, isn't it? The moon.
You have brought this back now to where I was going to go a little while ago, earlier in the conversation, because you were talking about how these things, you just feel about these things. You've now just talked about the moon and how you feel about that. This to me is an empath.
Yes.
This is empathy. This is
Some of it is,
feeling
yeah.
things, yes?
And
particularly in relation to other people.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the way you feel about the people in your books,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming drawn to them and with them. How do you feel about empathy? How do you feel about that whole area?
It's weird, because it was years before I realised what it was, because I just couldn't understand why I'd get so upset about certain things. Usually, I'll be honest, usually around animals and things like that, when
Okay.
things have happened and things I've gone past, and it was only when I went to see a medium that they actually told me, well, you're clairsentient anyway, but you're also an empath, and this is why you feel all this stuff. You feel a higher degree of connection with the earth, with animals, and what's going on inside them. So any harm that anyone does, it's almost like it's somebody's personally harmed you, and that it's bizarre feeling, and it's one of those you've got to try and block it out, because if you're empathetic, you quite often you take on other people's issues. So if you're in a room full of people, unless you can block it, you can draw into yourself what's going on with everybody else, and it can make you feel absolutely drained and
Often
physically
you can
exhausted.
walk into a room and feel the atmosphere.
Yeah.
We talk about feeling the atmosphere in the room, but in actual fact, it is the empathy. It is the what is going on in there. We've discussed this at length previously. We've talked about things like energies and how your energies change. Chris Burgess demonstrated quite empathically how our mind controls various things we do. Lorena, who came on here, was talking about animals, and Chase, who mostly spends his time behind the camera rather than in front of it, was talking about how when if he sees roadkill, for example, he goes all goose pimply, and he can feel the pain of that animal.
Yeah, I'm the same. And to the point where I think about, it's almost like I can see the offspring they've left behind, and that they'll be waiting for their mum or dad to come home, and they're not coming home, and I feel, it's almost like it's my own.
Isn't this just nature, though? Isn't this just nature? And if you lived in the country, if you saw roadkill, you'd take it home and eat it.
Probably, yeah.
You know? I've heard a sigh come from behind the camera, but in actual fact, they do.
Some people do.
They do take it home and eat it.
But at the end of the day, it's a life. Somebody's taken a life when.
But don't we do that every day when we
do.
We do.
Do
Do you eat meat?
I'm erring towards vegetarian now.
Ah.
Yeah, no, seriously, I don't eat a lot of meat. No. I'm not a vegetarian, but I don't eat a lot of meat, and it's going to sound weird, but when I drive past, the lorries full of the animals, and the empathy comes out, and then that's it. There's no way I eat meat for ages and ages and ages. I just can't do it. And I think that's why I'm erring more towards the vegetarian now.
But what about when these poor fields of cress and so on cry out when they're being chopped off?
Living. This is it.
Okay, look, I'm being facetious. I jest.
There is no answer to this. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. It's just, I think, if we're going to go on to what's going on with the planet, we all need to look at the way we're consuming everything and change it.
I accept that, but we're not going to go. That's a whole different topic, and it's not for the train. That's for somebody else's show. But yeah, there is an awful lot around that. But the thing is, it's interesting saying what's going on with the planet, because what we're looking at is what's going on outside of the planet and the effects that there are from things which we just don't understand, and we just don't know what they are. And what fascinates me is how you've got werewolves and you've got witches, and they are fighting each other. What's that program that's been on the TV, a series, or is it on Netflix?
Which one?
What's it?
The Underworld series?
No, what's the girl?
Oh, Sabrina.
Sabrina.
Brilliant, love it.
Yeah, Sabrina. It's. You said brilliant, love it. It sounds similar. Your books sound. Or is it just that there are a whole range of these things?
Sabrina's, it's always been out. Sabrina's been out because she's a comic, isn't she? It's the Archie comics. It's a character out of the comics.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the same. Riverdale is Archie comics.
Yeah.
That's
Riverdale.
where it's
What's
from.
Riverdale?
That's Netflix show. Watch it.
Am I?
They're all links. The two shows are links. They mention the towns that they're set in and stuff.
I'll
have the two towns next to each other.
I'll have a look at that, but I spend far too much time trying to sort out what I'm doing on the train. That's what. That's my excuse. I'm sticking to it.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch from the 80s is the same. Sabrina.
Yeah, but this one they're doing on Netflix is darker, and I like it because it's darker.
Sabrina.
And it touches on, because it's all set with, because she's obviously a witch, she lives within a witch family, and she goes to this school, and she's part human, part witch. And
you're a bit scary, aren't you?
Why?
Well, no, I mean you like the dark stuff.
Oh yeah.
You're a bit scary. And
I quite like that.
Don't you have that?
I'm a scary girl. Tales from a Scary Girl.
Tales from a Scary Girl.
That's
I shall remember that. Okay, so we're now looking at empathy, and you've just said a little while ago that you're clairsentient, which is, for those who don't know, is feeling things.
Stuff.
Yeah? You feel stuff. Clairaudient, you hear stuff.
Clairvoyant, you
see stuff. Clairsentient, I personally prefer to call that kinesthetic,
okay.
which is feeling.
Yeah.
But what do you understand is clairsentient?
From what I've understood, it's that being able to either feel a spirit when they're touching you, which has happened to me, or you go into a building or a place or a room and you can feel
the
what's
atmosphere in the
happened
room.
there. I've been to places like, for example, Harden Woods. I don't know whether you know Harden.
I know Harden.
You know, if you go into the woods, there's an abandoned mill.
There is.
And it's fallen down.
It has.
Well, I went there and I could feel what had happened to some people there. You know, the crushing on the chest, the struggle to breathe, because if you imagine what it must have been like in a mill. And
I remember that mill before it actually fell down.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was always in disorder. It was never a full. I never remember it being a full mill. But
it's got the water wheel, hasn't
yes,
it?
it has.
And I knew, I mean, there's going to have been injuries over the years, and you can feel it. It's like somebody had gotten stuck beneath the water wheel, and you've got that pressure.
There's something very similar in Chester at the weir.
Oh, right.
There used to be, there's the salmon leap beside the weir. Well, where there are now houses, brand new flats, that used to be a mill, and I can remember that as a mill, and I can remember as a kid climbing into it, actually getting in there through the water wheel, through the space where the water wheel was, and I remember being very scared, very frightened, and wanting to get out very quickly because of how it felt and the things that had gone wrong there. We've had a couple of other people on here, and I want to put something to you. We actually have had a couple of paranormal investigating people on here, talking about paranormal and talking about not just seeing things, but a group of people seeing things. Now, I would like to know your opinion. We've got your opinion on witches and on werewolves.
Famous M.A.Cope's opinion.
M.A.Cope's opinion on.
She's on a soapbox.
What about angels and demons?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. What?
No, I'm being of the darker variety. I would prefer the demon. I like the idea of demons. I think they probably do exist. I think angels exist. They're your spirit guides, aren't they? They're angels.
Are
you
they?
can talk to the not always. Some of them you can be connected to.
That's another story. We've got 3 minutes.
Yeah. That's a whole, yeah. I mean, I'm not an expert on anything like that because it's just when I've been seeing mediums and stuff, I'm told that there's guardian angels that are looking out for me. When I went on Sunday, I was told I've got a spirit guide called Lily, but she's a relative. She's in my past somewhere, and I went out to ring my mother up and say, "Do we know anyone called Lily?" And she said, "Oh yeah, your grandma's sister."
Ah,
you know, and things like this. But the demon stuff, it's all similar to what we've been talking about but demons, in theory, people say they come from underneath. So they're coming from the bowels of hell.
You're trying not to say hell, aren't you? Yeah.
No, I'm going to say it. They're coming from the bowels of hell, and they're all based around Lucifer. Well, Lucifer's a fallen angel. He was an angel.
I'm lost for words because perhaps he is, perhaps he isn't. I have read that book, but
I haven't read it. No,
I've read the book, but I'm not quite sure I believe it. But still,
well, there's like Hades. Hades was banished, wasn't it? If you depending which.
Hades was the place, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but Hades is the
the man who went the underworld.
King of the underworld.
Yeah.
Well, he was banished to the underworld.
Yep.
So is he Lucifer? Is he Satan? It depends which train of thought you, or which legend. You like that? I've got the train. Which legend? That's a good word. Legend you want to believe, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, you're now into things like.
Greek, you've got mythology, Greek, Roman,
and Roman mythology, which is
different.
Yes, let's. But however, having said it's all different, it isn't. It's actually all the same if you look at it, but with a different spin. Yeah, and in actual fact, if you go back to the really old stories, the old stories, it is all there, and it's all there, all laid out, simply to be offered, to be switched about, and to be changed, and from an author like yourself to grab hold of and make something,
this is it.
Spin something out of it.
And this is where the stories come from, because I've been thinking about doing something based on the Princes of Hell.
Wow.
So, but you know, you take what you find about them that's reported about them that's been written, then right, okay, how can I change that? How can I make that?
I love the way your mind works. I really do.
Oh, it's always working.
Yeah, I can see that. We are now fast approaching a platform, and I have to say this has been most enjoyable. But this is your stop. This is where you get off.
Hold on. How do we find the books?
However, where do we find these books? Where can we get to buy them?
They're all on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. You can get at it either through Amazon, just looking them up, or through my website, which is Ann with an E, Cope.com.
MarieAnnCope.com.
And they're all on my website.
Okay. And I'm
on Facebook. I've got an author page on Facebook.
Brilliant.
M.A.Cope author.
So M.A.Cope author. Okay.
Just in case you didn't know.
Marie, thank you very much indeed.
No,
this has been
me.
Most enjoyable. Thanks for being on the train. Thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget, go and look up these books. And this has been The Train at Condor Online. And my name's John Durrant. Thank you very much.